A bombshell poll by the Centre for Brexit Policy showed 66% of red wall voters would reject Boris if the UK does not take full control of its waters, fishing-wise, post-2020. And now, as Christmas approaches, we say it's time to grow a pair of baubles, Boris.
Today on Brexit Unlocked, to help us stuff it to the Brussels turkeys, we are joined by four superb guests. First, Ben Habib with his weekly Barnier humbug take on Brexit. To discuss our sellout to the European Court of Human Rights, we are joined by barrister and writer Jon Holbrook.
And to champion a real Brexit British win over the EU, the banning of the barbaric practice of live animal exports to Europe from the UK, we are joined by farmer and author Dawn Westcott. And finally, to share news that the spirit of Brexit is alive and kicking in Europe, we are joined by Thomas Fazi, a prominent figure in the Italy-exit movement.
You know, did you know, what's that story you told me earlier about this orgy? Because I'd just like to dwell, if we could, on this orgy in Brussels.
We need to touch on every light-hearted subject during these sort of morose, dark cloud days as we can. Yes, the police officers that finally came upon this orgy were mistaken for strippers, and the guests actually tried to undo their trousers. I bet you missed Brussels, Martin. Yeah,
the came upon bit there, I think, was a bit of a slip. But look, the thing about that, it was most likely on expenses, which probably means it was paid for by the taxpayer, by us. We are paying for this jiggery pokery in Brussels. Ben Habib, I can see you chortling away. I'm sorry to lower the tone. Now, could you please bring a modicum of sensibility back to this conversation? And let's talk about what's been going on this week. You've been giving us our daily Wake Up Boris videos on Unlocked. You've had a lot to say about Boris Johnson on Brexit this week. Ben Habib, what's the state of play?
Well, the state of play is that we have been absolutely rumbled. All our threats of being prepared to walk away with no deal have been revealed to be empty. And Barnier is now like a cat playing with a mouse that he has caught in his paws, and he's waiting to put in the final bite. And, you know, I've been in bilateral negotiations where my counterparty has revealed their weakness. And when you have a situation like that, it's wonderful because you can go on tugging at them, you can go on mucking them about, taking them right down to the wire until they're utterly desperate to be put out of their misery. And I'm afraid that's where Boris Johnson is right now. He signed up to a deal which was bad for the UK. He signed up to a political declaration that required the UK to sign into a level playing field, fix fishing quotas, ECJ supremacy, etc. He spent a year ignoring it. And now, after all his empty threats, his bluff is being finally called. And Barnier, I think, is enjoying every moment of it. He actually doesn't mind if we exit with a no deal. What he wants is maximum humiliation now for the United Kingdom, because he's sending a political message out to all the other EU member states that they must never do what we've done. So he sees this as his kind of a celebratory moment, the point in time where he can push back against all those rhetorical empty threats that we've made and say, well, actually, now come on, boys, where's that bite?
And Ben, how much time do you think they're actually talking about trade? I mean, a trade deal could have been organised and negotiated years ago. What is actually being discussed? Is it that the EU is trying to get as much power grab out of this as possible and trade is far down on the list?
That's absolutely right. I mean, they've got a 600-page document in circulation, which has been in circulation for a while. We've been told it's 95% agreed, by which I think they mean the script rather than the key points. And, you know, the last 5% are the really crucial bits. And the last 5%, just to remind viewers, are the 5% that Boris said he'd walk away on back in June, then July, then September, October, and now we're still here talking, you know, which is just to remind viewers again, that's the level playing field, fishing, and the ECJ's role, if any, going forward in United Kingdom's affairs.
So Ben, I want to talk about this report out today, the Centre for Brexit Policy, which makes a point that we've been making time and time again here on Unlocked, and that is the political fallout of the betrayal, particularly of fishing. 66% of voters who converted to the Tory party for the first time in December last year at the general election, lifelong Labour, who backed the blue corner on Brexit. 2/3 are saying they would switch back to the Labour Party if Boris betrays Britain on fishing. Ian Duncan Smith today said, this survey shows that the people of the Red Wall will not forgive my party if we cave into Brussels' pressure. He is completely right, Ben Habib, but when will Boris listen to this?
Well, Boris puts political expediency ahead of all other matters. The reason he signed up to the withdrawal agreement last year was just political expediency. He needed a deal to win the election. He thought he'd sort it out later. And now he's back in this difficult position where he sees a failure to get a deal as a failure in statecraft. And so he will do whatever he can to get that deal. He's not thinking about the Red Wall. For him, the Red Wall is a problem for 2024. But let me say, Martin, I don't think he's going to win that Red Wall back ever. And it's not just about Brexit. It's about what's happened during the COVID pandemic. The government inadvertently or deliberately has actually shown contempt for the Red Wall voters. It's shown contempt for the north of England. It's locked them up where lockups weren't needed. It's given them less help than it's given the south. And if you take 80% of people's wages in the north, that's a hell of a lot less than it is in the south. And particularly for people on minimum wage. So actually, all that chat about levelling up the country, all that chat about delivering a proper Brexit, all of that went straight out of the window. I think Boris is going to be remembered for having won a thumping majority and losing it at the subsequent election against all predictions.
Yeah, it's funny how Remainers have spent the last 4 years calling Brexit the single biggest political act of self-harm in history. I think Boris has somehow superseded that. What he's done since December has been simply stunning, and I completely agree, Ben Habib. Before we go to the next question, I just want to remind you, if you're watching now, please share this on Facebook, put comments underneath. We are getting comments flooding in. We're going to read a few of those out soon, but the next question, please, Belinda.
Yeah, Ben, I wanted to ask you about this new latest fishing quota offer I believe the UK has made to Barnier of 60%. Now, wasn't it at the beginning that there'd be no fixed quotas and there'd be an annual review, and then it suddenly went to, okay, we'll have 80% of our fish back, thank you for the breadcrumbs, Barnier, and now it's down to 60%. What's going on?
Well, we are slipping. Every time Barnier gets a bit more, he asks for a bit more. We offered them 50% of the fishing, I think 3 months ago, and the EU turned us down. Then we offered them another transitionary period of 3 years on our fishing. And, now we're offering them 60%, and we may find that it's actually 70%. But by the way, when the agreement comes forward, Belinda, it won't say we've given them 70%. It'll be dressed up in all sorts of language to obscure that. And it'll only be people, nerds, Brexit nerds who are obsessed with the detail who'll realise the sellout.
Thank goodness for Brexit nerds, Ben, because you are the king. And if it was, and you've been pretty much right on everything, hasn't he, Martin?
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say one thing, though. You probably finished with me. One thing I want to say is I am beginning to hope we might just trip into a no-deal situation. The cat's playing with the mouse, but the cat may just over-egg it, and we may just trip into a no deal. And rather like the millennium bug, for those of us who are old enough to remember it, we might find that once we've tripped over the 1st of January 2021, actually the sun rises, we get a clear blue sky, and absolutely everything is fine. And suddenly we don't need a deal. And that would be the best result.
I wanted to ask, do you think Macron is actually going to end up being our secret weapon? I mean, he has threatened to veto a deal if he's not happy with it. And he's spent a lot of time with the French fishermen, convincing them he's going to stand up for them and he'll veto a deal that doesn't represent their interests. Do you think he could veto it all for us and we'll be happy and walk away?
I doubt Macron will veto it, but I think he may just tip it over the edge in error. This is going remarkably close to the wire now. I think we've got sort of 8 days of parliamentary time left before the end of the year. So how we get all of this done in time for 31st December is going to be really interesting to me. I think Macron's playing to his base. Macron always likes to thump the drum and, he's a bit of an empty vessel when it comes to action. But, I just hope we trip into no deal and we find, like the millennium bug, that actually no deal is better than any deal.
Okay, got a couple of comments coming in on Facebook here. Brendan Doyle says, our fisheries are small, but it's the principle that matters. Let's get our jobs back. And Christine Gilmurray, we in the Northeast will dig Boris a ditch if he sells us out. So the ditch Boris said he will die in, they're offering to dig in the Northeast there, Belinda. One final question for you, Ben, before we move on to Jon Holbrook, who's waiting very, very patiently there in the wings. Ben, my fears, you're right. I think Boris is going to sell us a BRINO, the pig with the lipstick. He's decimated the economy. Despite all of this, could he still wriggle out of the noose by rolling out this vaccine?
I don't think the vaccine gets him off the Brexit hook. And if you've been reading what Fauci said in the US yesterday, they've actually got concerns about the speed with which the UK has approved the Pfizer vaccine. They think that we should have been more inquisitive about the information put forward by Pfizer. We've just taken it at face value. So, I really hope the vaccine works, by the way. I really hope it works, because we've got to get out of this funk. We've got to get the United Kingdom moving forward again. But I don't think, whatever happens with the pandemic now, that the way the North was treated during the pandemic, the economic damage already done, from which we certainly will not recover if we sign into an EU level playing field, and then the sellout on Brexit. People won't forget it. People say, a few days in politics can be a very long time. Actually, I think people are going to remember this in 2024, and Boris is going to be in for a shock.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Just to say, though, actually, Fauci has withdrawn his comments and apologised for them.
Okay. Well,
just to let you know, yeah.
Guys, got some live breaking news here. Number 10 admits talks at a very difficult point as France threatens to veto a trade deal. So this one's going to go all the way to the wire. Ben Habib, we're going to move on now to our next guest, Jon Holbrook. So, Jon, we want to talk to you about some of the legalities, the technicalities around all of this. In particular, this week, it was announced that Boris Johnson is prepared to keep the UK in the European Court of Human Rights. What does that mean? And does this still mean that European Union judges will still be able to rule over the UK?
Well, I think it's quite a big deal, Martin. And although we've had those leaks about the UK remaining signed up to the ECHR, we've also had those leaks before, back in October. So I think there's probably quite a good chance that this is what this deal is going to commit us to do. Basically means that not only will we be signed up to the ECHR by signing that treaty, but that also under this trade agreement, we will be committed to remaining a member of the European Court of Human Rights. Now, to me, that is a big deal. And I actually think to all those people who voted for Brexit, it's a big deal as well, because people voted to leave the EU because they wanted to take back control of their laws, money, and their borders. And so long as we remain committed to the ECHR, there is no chance of that happening, because there are so many laws which we cannot change as a nation because the judges in Strasbourg won't let us, whether that's laws about prisoners. We all know about prisoners voting, but more generally, the laws have a huge amount to say about our prison regime. They impact on any interventions overseas. They impact on our welfare policies. Welfare benefits can all be challenged on the basis of just about any social policy you can think of can be ruled upon by those judges in Strasbourg. So it is a big deal.
Yes, because I mean, we put it up on Twitter quite a bit, our concerns, but we got a lot of Brexiteers actually responding saying, oh, no, it's not the EU, it's totally different. And each nation has an emergency sort of parachute clause that we can suddenly say no to all of that. But Theresa May, who voted Remain, and she was more pro-EU than Boris, committed to removing us from the European Court of Human Rights so that we could have a British Bill of Rights. Why do you think Boris is starting to go back on that when he's supposed to be more pro-Brexit?
Well, I mean, Theresa May's view on the ECHR was always quite interesting, and I think she strongly disliked those judges in Strasbourg because she was the Home Secretary. And if you are the Home Secretary, then you constantly have those judges bearing down on you, whether it's with your own policing and justice systems, or whether it's with immigration and border control, which becomes almost impossible so long as you're signed up to the ECHR. So I think it was very much born out of her personal experience and making a great many of decisions and policies, which were then overturned by judges either in the ECHR or by British judges who were essentially just doing as those Strasbourg judges required. So I suppose Boris has never had that experience, but I actually don't think Theresa May would ever have taken us out of the ECHR, because I think the Tory party has never formally committed to take us out of that institution. In fact, their last manifesto simply said we would update the Human Rights Act, but it never said anything at all about either repealing the Human Rights Act or, more importantly, withdrawing from the ECHR. So, you know, Dominic Cummings was quite keen, I think, to get us out of the ECHR, but I don't think the rest of the Tory party has ever shown much enthusiasm for that policy.
Thank you. That's helped a lot, actually, because we needed to get quite clear on Boris's commitment to that and what it meant for our sovereignty. We've had more messages from Facebook. We have one from Sandy Jones saying it's not just a red wall that Boris is betraying if he wimps out. It's hardcore Southern Conservatives too. I, for one, will not vote for them at the next general election if he sells us down the Swanee.
Yeah, so I think it's this concept keeps coming out. This idea that BRINO will be okay, or it'll be sold and people will buy it. I'm not buying that at all. I'm not hearing that at all. Of course, most of our networks and followers are pure Brexiteers, but I think the political ramifications will be terrible on this. Jon, before we move on to the conversation around the legal benefits of the level playing field, a huge sticking point. There's something else that was thrown at us this week, just to clarify for people listening on Unlocked and the Daily Express. The ECHR falls under the Council of Europe, not the European Union. They're different things. We didn't vote to leave this. What are you lot getting your niggers in a twist about? Can you please clarify that for us, Jon?
Well, it's certainly true that they are different institutions, but they are born of the same ethos, really. I mean, they were both set up at around about the same time, you know, both post-war institutions, and they were set up very much to try and curtail the right of people to govern their own affairs. I mean, they went about it in different routes. But the reason why I think this is important is because at the moment, we could, as a sovereign state, simply withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, the problem is, if we are committed to staying in that institution through this trade deal, which we may or may not be about to sign, then there doesn't, well, we don't know, but the chances are that there won't be an easy exit strategy. You know, like at least when we were in the EU, we had the advantage that we could trigger Article 50 and we could withdraw. But that's one of the problems that we've got with the withdrawal agreement. That's cemented rights now, some of which will endure in perpetuity. And so a sovereign nation should never sign a treaty which doesn't have a clear and unilateral right to withdraw from it. And I fear we're not going to get that with what's going to be unveiled over the next few weeks.
It's the exit clause in these treaties that we all need to see written in very, very dark ink. And unless we see that, there is a worry. And of course, it's a worry for any sovereign nation to have foreign judges rule over issues that don't necessarily concern them. When we try to deport terrorists during when May was Home Secretary, we had a terrible time with the ECHR trying to deport them. It took years, and it's just not right, and it doesn't make sense. So I understand people's concerns over that. I wanted to ask you, Jon, because this level playing field is an issue, and there are concerns, and we have heard rumours from good sources that actually this whole fishing theatre is a kind of a cover-up for the holy grail that the EU is really after, that level playing field to shackle us down with all their regulations. That is what they're really after. Can you tell our viewers what are the consequences long-term for the UK if we end up compromising on this big level playing field issue for a trade deal?
Well, it seems to me that nations ought to be able to compete. I mean, that isn't that the whole point of being a nation? You try and get an advantage over other nations, but you do that knowing that those other nations will be doing the same. So, you recognize that your nation is premised on its own interests. And the difficulty we have here is that Boris seems prepared to trade away a lot of our interests. It seems to me he hasn't recognized that the EU is a political construct that is determined to preserve its political order and to demonstrate to all its other members who might think about wanting to leave the EU that it's not a good idea, by essentially punishing Britain by imposing on it certain terms which it's not going to find easy to cope with. Level playing field sounds fine, but at the end of the day, if we, for example, wanted different employment laws, which as a sovereign state we certainly ought to be able to debate and have, and if as a consequence of those changed employment laws, our workplaces become more efficient and more competitive, then surely that's a good thing. Isn't that what democracy is all about? We should be able to have that debate as a nation. That's a debate between our elected representatives and we the people. But if we sign up to level playing field notions, regulate different workplace onwards, then we're going to cease to be a proper functioning democracy.
Can I quickly cut back to Ben Habib, please? Because I know, Ben, you've been very, very vocal on the clear benefits of being able to break free from the level playing field. Can you just outline for us in simple terms some of the really positive trading, taxation, state aid benefits of being finally free, Ben?
Well, as Jon has, very brilliantly outlined, the EU is a political animal, and like all political organisms, it wishes to entrench power in itself, and it does that through its very, its sort of vast web of regulatory pronouncements and laws that it creates, and it does this at a vast rate on just about every single issue. We used to hear about, bananas, for example, having to be a particular shape and carrots having to be a particular length, and while some of those may be apocryphal stories, there is truth behind all of that. And all these regulations that they pass all create a burden on business. For every regulation that business has to adhere to, there is an associated cost. There has to be, like with GDPR, like with Solvency II for the city, like with MiFID II. All these regulations burden down business. Now that's fine when you have a good economic climate and you wish to direct businesses in a particular social direction. But we just had the mother of all recessions, the biggest recession in 300 years. As Jon has said, we need the right as a sovereign state to deregulate those parts of our country which are required to be deregulated, those parts of our businesses, our commercial landscape, our industry, so that we can do what's right for the United Kingdom, putting Great Britain's and Northern Ireland's interests first, and doing what's right for us, not being burdened by this level playing field that will hamstring us and prevent us from being able to act as a sovereign competitive country. The EU fears us becoming a Singapore on Thames, and that, therefore, if I were Prime Minister, is precisely what I would aim to be.
Yeah, and of course, it's really important to remember that all the regulations that our small businesses, I think 92% of them don't even trade with the EU, but all these regulations, they are already under. What's it going to be like in 10 years? The EU is ever evolving. The Commission has to constantly justify itself by making up new regulations. How much are they going to suffer in 5-10 years' time? These are big questions.
They are indeed. And could I please encourage anybody watching to share? If you're watching live now, share with your friends on Facebook. This is Friday, tea time. Pour yourself a stiff one. Listen to some wisdom. Ben Habib, you said there, if you're in number 10, people are already saying Ben for 10. I'm hearing it all over the place. Ben, you throw your head back and laugh. We're not laughing, mate. We might hold you to this one day to put some sense into that bloody place. And we are getting loads of Facebook comments coming in. Let's have a couple here. Andy, I'm so angry we voted for Boris. He has really failed the people who voted Brexit. These are Daily Express readers saying this to us in real time on a Friday night. The anger Belinda, is palpable. Another one, Brendan. We are a great country with lots of potential. We just need to look after ourselves for a while so we can help others.
And I know there's plenty of Boris lovers out there, but you need to understand there is a reason why we are cynical. Boris has missed the deadlines and he has not come out fighting. It feels like we're being conned. It's all smoke and mirrors and sort of knavery and trickery, the same sort of stuff we had under May. And I just wish Boris had walked away, because we'd be far further on in getting our country back and helping our economy.
Absolutely. And before we move on to Dawn Westcott, who's been waiting very patiently in the wings, although you've been laughing and smiling and nodding and punching the air, so you haven't been entirely bored in the corner there, Dawn. I'd like to ask one final question, if I could, to Jon, and that is this. We hear a lot about if Britain tears up the withdrawal agreements, we'll be breaking international law. Will we? In any way? Who cares?
Well, I think that's all quite an interesting question, isn't it? Because it seems to me that Boris and everyone else who cheered that withdrawal agreement never properly read it. Because they only seem to have now discovered that withdrawal agreement will enable the EU to partition the United Kingdom down the Irish Sea. I mean, what sensible government could possibly have signed a country up to that? So that's the difficulty that he's now realised we're in. So he's now proposing to pass national legislation that will enable us to breach our international obligations. Now, I don't have a problem with that. It seems to me international law is very different from national law. It's not binding in the same way. It largely works on the basis of consent. But the problem is that there are enforcement mechanisms under the withdrawal agreement, and the EU have said they won't shy away from using them. And ultimately, if you do battle with a coercive law, and this law under the withdrawal agreement will be coercive, then you tend to come off badly. But having said that, if the government was serious about it and it explained to the people why it was necessary to do this, in other words, it goes to the very essence and integrity of our nation, then it seems to me there would be scope for us doing it and getting away with it. But the problem, one of the many problems with Boris, is that he won't ever have that argument with us. He won't ever tell it like it is, and he won't mobilise the people, because if he tried it, I'm sure he would have some success.
Well, Jon, we've just had a message on Facebook from a Johnny. He says the ECJ is the final arbiter for anything in the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Yeah.
We obviously having a foreign court, be the arbiter of any treaty between two parties is wrong and almost unheard of in international law. How likely is it that the ECJ will still have jurisdiction in the UK after a deal is announced? Do you think Boris will buckle on that?
Well, I think we already know that they will continue to have jurisdiction over the UK, not least because of the position of EU citizens. You know, EU citizens in this country will continue to have rights which will be determined by the ECJ. And incidentally, one of the points I've often made about this is that we know at the moment that they don't have the right to vote in national elections, but the ECJ overnight, or any other institution in the EU, could actually change that. So you know, I don't think Boris has ever had a principled position in opposition to the ECJ ruling it over us. So I think it's quite likely that when we see this future trade agreement, there will be provisions that enable the ECJ to be the ultimate arbiter of disputes.
Jon, an icy finger tapped on the window there, and I think it's a wake-up call. You know, we should not walk into this blindfolded. We should not sleepwalk into more control from the European Union, and we should just fight all the way to the wire. Yeah. People on Facebook are really, really agreeing with the sense that's being spoken tonight. They're completely agreeing with you, Jon, and you, Ben. There's a comment just come in from Julie, a friend of the show. A vote of no confidence in this government should be called. And I'm afraid, Ben Habib, another fan of yours, Ben Habib for Prime Minister, please, from Kate. So be careful what you wish for, Mr. Habib. Now, Ben and Jon, please stick around because, as is customary on Unlocked, we want to wait for your message to Boris Johnson. Think of a nice, pithy message for Boris Johnson. But now it's time to move on to our next guest. Dawn Westcott.
Before we do you know what really concerns me, Martin, is that any control we give the EU above and beyond what a trade deal requires, I just don't believe it will be used in good faith. You know, it's like having a divorce with a rejected, petulant lover who then has control over someone that they just don't wish well upon, and that is my fear. But moving on to the wonderful Dawn Westcott, I'm so pleased that you're on the show, yeah. Dawn. You've been such a steadfast supporter for years. Farmer, author, co-founder of the Exmoor Pony Project, and keen conservationist. Great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on. Boris looks set to ban the cruel EU practice of transporting livestock from the UK to the EU. I mean, it is a horrific practice. What is your take on this, and why is it so important that we do it?
Well, it is really important to really strongly regulate live export, and we have seen some really horrible situations where you know, you see animals going out through places like Ramsgate and you don't know where they're going, and the minute they leave the UK we lose control of them, so we don't know how long the ongoing journey is going to be. We don't know how they're going to be treated. We've heard of lorry loads, shiploads of ponies leaving the UK and then being transported horrendously long journeys without having rests or proper, you know, water or refreshments, and then being sent to Italy to be slaughtered, you know, made into handbags. There's just some, I think we all saw that horrible story recently about the sheep that were crammed onto that ship, which then sunk and they drowned. You know, the suffering, calves, you see them sort of biting, stuffed together, biting the railings and things. It's just awful and it needs to stop. But Boris, from what I understand, is talking about banning live export from England and Wales, but not Scotland and not Northern Ireland. So yes, we can regulate what happens across the English Channel, but what's going to happen with livestock coming in from wherever in the world to the Republic of Ireland, routing through Northern Ireland, coming across the Irish Sea, and then travelling long distances up and down this country to markets, and then perhaps even being transported from the market to the other end of the country to slaughter capacity, to the abattoirs. So I'm waiting to see how this is all going to be addressed. It seems a little bit simplistic at the moment.
You know, it seems outstanding to me, and it's just perplexing, Belinda. You know, we talked about this earlier, the kind of hypocrisy that you get from so many people who voted Remain, back parties like the Green Party or the Liberal Democrats, and so often they expose values of despising animal cruelty. And we saw with fishing how so many Greens are Remainers, yet they have no problem with stun pulse fishing. And isn't it funny how they seem to turn a blind eye? Bullfighting, fishing, you know, animal exports, foie gras. They seem to turn a blind eye to all this because somehow the sacred European Union trumps their own actual belief system.
Like it's a religion. I mean, the carbon footprint alone of all these MEPs traveling all across Europe, not just to Brussels, but then to Strasbourg, I think would put any Greenpeace person off membership. And Dawn, you make some really good points. I think it's a good step and a step in the right direction. There are lots of cruel practices that, I mean, the UK is a nation of animal lovers, let's be honest. Yeah. And Boris has this chance to be a beacon of light to the world on how to treat your animals. Yeah,
and another thing, Dawn, I'd like to talk to you about is, I know I've spent a lot of time with you, spent a lot of time with farmers. A lot of farmers are passionate Brexiteers. And there's been another thing constantly thrown about, and that is farmers are dependent on the European Union because they get generous grants and allowances, but hardly anything has been made of the huge, exciting chances and opportunities outside of the European Union if we leave with a good deal. As a farmer yourself, what kind of optimistic things do you think awaits the farming industry in the UK?
I think one of the huge advantages is that we will be able to tailor agricultural policy to suit British farming. The Common Agricultural Policy has had to suit every member state. So Northern Europe, Southern Europe, all have different farming needs. And it's been distributed in a way that is very difficult to make sure the money goes to the right places. So, for example, it's been distributed per acre, which means that huge landowners, there are advantages to accumulating a lot of land and getting a lot of the farming subsidies, farming support. So the money has been reaching landowners, which has been encouraging these great big ghost farms and land mass and huge big agribusiness. But it hasn't been routing through to the farmers farming the land, the small and medium-sized farmers who are absolutely intrinsic to keeping the countryside the way we like to see it, to keeping the life and soul in rural communities, to preserving wildlife and local food production. So the CAP system has actually not been very helpful for farmers per se in the United Kingdom. And I think the other thing to remember is that we've been giving the EU a lot of money and only getting part of it back. So we're not only going to be able to tailor our policy, but we're going to be able to route the money to the right places. And we must remember that, you know, farming is a public service. It needs support. It can't be left exposed to free market forces. And so we'll be able to, the government will be able to hopefully provide farming with the right support, you know, that it needs to succeed in this country. I think there are enormous opportunities if they get it right.
Well, Martin, I mean, that's very interesting, Jon. I've also been concerned over how farmers with fields get EU subsidies for keeping them barren without having to grow anything on them, and how on earth is that good for the environment or good for feeding the local, you know, inhabitants if you don't have to grow anything on your land to get all this money from the EU? So much of the policy seems bonkers, and it's so right to regain that control over our laws to suit the best interests of British farmers, which are very different from the French farmers, who, by the way, get most of the taxpayers' money to subsidise them. That's rarely spoken about. I did want to ask, you know, now our politicians are far more accountable for animal welfare policies, having left the EU. Where do you think Boris should take it next? Because, of course, we have an issue with religious slaughter in this country, and the issue of not stunning animals before they're killed. Is that something that many farmers and animal lovers are passionate about in this country changing?
It's horrific. It's surely time that we address this, and that the religious groups, halal and kosher religious groups, came together and addressed this whole situation where if an animal is being slaughtered according to religious rites, then you don't have to stun it. But we need to look at what happens when you don't stun an animal in the food chain, in the slaughter line. That animal remains fully conscious and feels the agonizing pain and terror of having its throat cut. I mean, this is something that really shouldn't be happening in this country. And surely, as civilization evolves and conversations evolve, surely the government can sit down with religious groups and say, look, please, you know, let's facilitate the blessings and the handling of these animals, but they simply must be stunned. Stunning must be mandatory, because our Animal Welfare Act 2006 stipulates that it is against the law in this country to cause unnecessary suffering, and withholding humane pre-stunning from an animal that's in the food chain is definitely causing unnecessary suffering. The other thing is, another thing that's really quite frightening is that the meat that's coming through that's not been stunned, some of it ends up in the general food chain and in processed food and whatever. So people in this country that feel very strongly about that are unwittingly eating meat that has not been stunned, and that's not fair.
Yeah,
no, Dawn, you know, it's so you know, such truth that you speak, and I know that this is an issue that Express readers really, really care about. I think there's a huge conversation to be had about religious slaughter, and there's a lot of elephants in the room around these conversations.
But there shouldn't be.
No, there shouldn't be.
It's about cruelty and about harm, and I think it's wonderful if you want religious blessings, and that would be totally respected. But how Boris could stand up and say what a win for the UK by stopping the live export of animals, while at the same time turning a blind eye to this, I think he has to be all for it, don't you?
I absolutely concur. I absolutely agree. Now, we're still getting loads and loads of comments coming in on Facebook. You guys are obviously saying some really cool stuff tonight. It's really getting people going in front of their computers at home. Expressland going mad. Here's another one. BRINO is not okay. We need complete control of our country. That's what we voted for. Many of us, North and South, won't forget this betrayal of our democracy. And there's another one there, Belinda, from Natalie.
Yes, Natalie says, this is heartbreaking. In 2020, we treat animals like this. It is vile. And that's the point. There's no need for it. We're a civilized country.
That's it. And Christine has a comment. The withdrawal agreement hands us over to the EU, lock, stock, and barrel. Now, guys, please hang around. We have one more guest, and then I want to come back to you for your comments to Boris Johnson. So tee them up, get your powder ready to fire, get your barrels loaded. But
this could be your last chance.
This could be your last chance, because we're hearing as we speak a deal of some sort is expected over the weekend. Newsnight are teeing up their show this evening, saying they expect something this weekend. So get ready for your comments to Boris Johnson's. But before that, we have a final guest who I spoke to earlier today from Italy. We had him on the show before, Thomas Fazi, a proud Eurosceptic from Italy. He's a prominent voice in the Italexit movement, or as we call him, Mr. Quitterly. I think Quitterly's got more of a ring to it than Italexit. Anyway, I spoke to Thomas Fazi earlier on from Lazio, and here he is.
So, Thomas, we have seen you before in a previous episode of Unlocked, a Eurosceptic special that was viewed nearly 500,000 times in the UK. Very, very well received. And we said at that time that Italy are the bookies' favourites as next to leave the European Union, with 45% either agreeing or strongly agreeing it would be a good idea to leave the European Union. So some new comments came out over the weekend in the UK here, Thomas, in the Sunday Express, saying that politicians in Rome are confident that Italy may be out in less than 2 years. Thomas, is that possible? And if so, how could it happen?
Well, hi, Martin, and thanks for having me on your show again. Well, I'd love that to be true. Frankly, I find it a bit optimistic. I think we spoke about this last time. I mean, there's... our elite parties, our establishment parties, are gonna really drag Italy into the ground before they even consider leaving the Euro or the European Union. So no matter how dramatic the situation gets, as long as the current establishment remains in power, there's hardly any chance of Italy leaving the Euro. So the only way of getting that to happen is to get new parties, Eurosceptic or anti-Euro parties like our party, the Italexit party, into Parliament in as big a number as possible. But of course, we know how this works, and even just getting into Parliament will be a very uphill struggle. We know that they're talking of raising the threshold in terms of percentage of the vote to get into Parliament, just to keep the kind of radical parties out. So we're facing an uphill struggle just to get into Parliament. But I think if we get into Parliament, that will already be a huge, I would say, a huge step forward, because it will allow us to get our message into the mainstream media once and for all. Getting Italy out in 2 years would mean not just getting into Parliament, but getting into government and holding the majority in government, which I would say is close to impossible. And I'm sorry to say that I don't think the scenario for Italy is going to be that different, even if the kind of centre-right parties led by the Lega win at the next elections, because they've been backtracking a lot on their European narrative in recent months, and frankly, I don't think they would have the nerves to get Italy out. So I think this is I'm afraid, quite a long battle that we're facing. But who knows? Italy is a crazy country, and the situation is very unstable. And I think we're heading into a very what would be a very heated autumn in economic and political terms, largely due to the fallout from the pandemic and the restrictions and the new lockdown, especially considering that there's no end in sight for this situation. Now everyone's, it's that they're quite serenely talking about this being the new normal, at least until the next summer. But I mean, that will mean decimating a huge part of our economy. I mean, we've already got thousands of businesses that are going bust. I mean, people are, especially in the service sector, the restaurant sector, the pubs, the hotels. I mean, it's utterly catastrophic. And the money that the government's putting in terms of support for these businesses is really, pennies compared to what would be necessary. So, we're heading into a very long, dark winter.
Okay, Thomas, before we move on to a feeling of the general Eurosceptic mood on the ground, because I know that when we last spoke, we were talking a lot about how the COVID crisis was really turning Italians against the EU because you were basically deserted in your hour of need, particularly with protective equipment you needed. But before that, can you just give us Brits an idea of how severe your COVID lockdowns are? And in particular, what's Christmas looking like for Italians?
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of the current lockdown is they've got a multi-tier system, I think much like in the UK. So we have areas where the pandemic is less serious, where restrictions, like in my region, for example, Lazio, where Rome is, where the restrictions are relatively light, but still quite heavy, especially on some sectors. So, for example, pubs and restaurants aren't allowed to be open after 6 p.m. So you can imagine how hard they're being hit by this kind of decision. Elsewhere in the so-called red zones, like up in northern Italy, the restrictions are much stricter in terms of restaurants aren't allowed to have people sitting down at any time and so on. So so it's especially the service and the tourism sectors that are being the most heavily hit in this lockdown. In terms of Christmas, they basically forbade any kind of movement between regions. So they've very strongly recommended that everyone stay at home. So they know that, it's impossible to enforce it. But of course, what they're saying is that everyone should try as much as possible to spend Christmas alone. And so what they're saying is that, if you can avoid to even have your neighbor over, that would be better. And so, so they're essentially asking, for, old people that, maybe only have, 6 months, a year left to spend their Christmas completely alone, because that's the reality for a lot of old people in Italy, of course. And Christmas and the holidays are one of the few moments when families can come together. And I think to deny that to families is I think is really hard to defend, especially, and this is the feeling that a lot of people have on the ground, especially when people get up in the morning to go to work and have to ride in crowded buses every morning. They have to ride in crowded metro trains every morning, and so people, it just seems a bit schizophrenic and kind of a way to just kind of lay the blame on the citizens. Yeah.
Okay, mate. So it sounds worse in Italy than here. I mean, if such a thing were possible, and what's happening in the UK is that there is huge political dissatisfaction about this. I'd be really curious to know. The Italians don't like being pushed around and being told what to do. The Brits tend to be more subservient, but even over here, there's a spirit of rebellion in the air. And there's great talk about the draconian measures by Boris Johnson being politically very damaging for our government. And then we've still got Brexit to come. So how damaging to the current political establishment in Italy has the COVID lockdown been, Thomas?
Well, I think it was very. I think they saw it as kind of a positive event at the beginning, in the sense that you know, we all know that when people are scared, they tend to look, you know, to up to authorities for protection and help, and they tend to question what authorities do less when they're afraid. And so I think in the first phase of the pandemic, there was strong support for government, basically because people looked up to the government for protection. And I think, you know, the parties in government at the moment, which weren't enjoying great public support before the pandemic, I wouldn't think it would be far-fetched to say that they almost saw this as a silver lining, you know, to have a completely terrified population, which they could, you know, present themselves as, you know, the protectors and so on. Now, this has changed a lot in recent months. People are starting to see that all the sacrifices that they've made have been completely useless. So Italy continues to have a huge, you know, incredibly high number of daily deaths, incredibly high number of people that are hospitalized every day, you know, and so people are asking, what was all that, what were all those sacrifices for? If we're right where we were, actually in a worse situation than we were almost back in the first wave, you know, and the government is already talking of a possible third wave. So, and of course, people look elsewhere to other countries that have had less severe lockdowns, that have had that have adopted measures that have had less of an impact on the economy, that have fared the same, if not even better, in purely health terms and in sanitary terms. And so people are wondering, what was the point of all of this? And so I think they're really turning against the government. And, you know, Italians have been very, very well behaved in the first phase of the pandemic. And, you know, everyone was praising Italians, how well behaved they were, you know, no one complained. Now, the reaction to the second lockdown has been very different. We saw, you know, we saw protests in the streets, we saw riots, we've seen, especially businesses in the service sector getting organized, even defined what are the restrictions just to stay open, whatever, you know, the economic cost for that may be. And so you can, there's definitely a very different feeling from the first wave. People are very, very tired. And yeah.
And how has it gone down in Italy with news this week that thanks to the UK leaving the European Union, we're going to be the first to get the COVID vaccine?
Well, I mean, I think it definitely lays bare to just how ridiculous the claim was that with Brexit, the UK would be cut off from basic medicines. They wouldn't be able to import aspirins. And instead, here you have the country, the UK basically announcing that they're going to fast track the vaccine and start giving it out to the population before anyone else. So I think now, regardless of, you know, the implications of that, you know, which one may be more or less critical of, I think it definitely lays bare to the claim that that the UK would have been, you know, would have been and will be shut off from the world in you know, following Brexit. I mean, I think that this clearly shows what a load of really bollocks that all was. Of course, the claim in the mainstream media is completely different, you know, and so they're trying to find a spin to kind of turn this against the UK. And of course, the spin is, oh yes, but they're being, you know, we're being much more responsible. The EU is going to protect you by running way more tests than the UK is going to run. And so, you know, trust us, you know, we're going to take longer, but we're going to take better care of you than the UK is going to take better care of its citizens. And this is coming from the European Union that we know is spending huge amounts of money to rush through a vaccine and to have it ready as soon as possible, even though we know that vaccines usually take years to be developed. And so, you know, usual kind of European doublespeak there.
It's amazing to think that we were told that we'd run out of sandwiches, we'd run out of cheese, we'd run out of beer, we'd run out of insulin, and yet we've been the first to receive a globally recognised first on the COVID-19 vaccine. Funny old thing. Hey, Thomas, now finally, the last time you were on the show, you gave us a rousing message to Brexiteers from Italy. Thomas, can you give us a message to the UK from Italy again today, please, sir?
Well, look, I would say that, again, now more than ever, countries need a ray of hope to hang on to. Again, the narrative we keep hearing in Italy is that really there is no alternative to the European Union. We have to be thankful for these pennies that the European Union is sending down to us, attached with very long, strings of conditionalities, and that we would be completely and utterly gutted, outside of the European Union. And so, despite receiving hardly anything from the European Union, we still have to be thankful because we'd be worse off outside of the EU. This is the message we keep hearing, and really the only way to really overturn that narrative is to have a living, concrete example. And the UK is partly already showing that, that's possible, and the vaccine is an example of that. But really going forward with Brexit, with a real Brexit, which allows the UK to really fully regain control of its economy, which means completely rejecting a BRINO, or Brexit in name only, and holding steadfast to the idea that Brexit means regaining full control of the British economy and rejecting all those absurd rules that the EU is trying once again to impose upon Britain, such as anti-state aid rules and so on. So really, in these dark times, we need a ray of hope. We need to see a light at the end of the tunnel. And for these past few years, the UK has been that light at the end of the tunnel. And so, I sincerely hope that the UK will continue to represent this hope for all the peoples of Europe that aspire to freedom and democracy.
Thomas, thank you so much for that message. And once again, it just goes to show on Unlocked, we reach out to our beautiful Eurosceptic friends across Europe. We love Europe. We love Europeans. We just don't like the European Union. And listen, thanks for your kind message this side of Christmas. And we hope to be delivering a New Year's present to Italy and to everybody else in the form of a clean, cool Brexit to inspire your movement to strive forward. Once again, Thomas Fazi, live from Italy. Thank you for joining us today on Unlocked.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure, mate.
Isn't it absolutely beautiful to see him? Thomas is a lovely guy. We met him on a Eurosceptic special, and he's a real tough guy with a soft centre. That noise you heard in the background, that's his 2-year-old baby. He did the pre-record because he wanted to do the feeding of his child while his partner had a nap.
Fresh air.
Yeah,
my goodness, you would never get someone like Thomas or a passionate young Eurosceptic on the BBC or Sky. And so it's so important that you hear that many Europeans are actually relying and depending on Brexit to be successful. It's so much bigger than just us regaining our control. It's giving hope to Democrats across Europe that they'll be able to still have their national parliaments have a say over their laws.
And so many parallels to scare tactics from the European Union. And isn't it amazing to feel that Brexiteers and Eurosceptics like Thomas, and we know in France, and we know in Spain, and in Finland, and in Holland, they're all saying, thank you, Brexiteers.
And whatever the spin, Martin, whatever the spin you get, it is a plain fact that the clunky tank of bureaucracy of the EU prevents each nation being able to react to urgent matters quickly and efficiently. That's just a fact. You can be a Remain or a Brexiteer. It takes much longer to get things done if you're in the EU. And if it's a crisis, people can die because of that delay. So we've got that vaccine. Yes, countries had an emergency clause. They could have pulled it themselves, but the pressure was on each EU member state to follow the herd and wait till everyone was ready. And that's the problem. It's the pressure governments are under to put the project before the people.
True. And Facebook was going berserk during that. We've got a load of more comments. We can't even read out the comments. We've got so many. I want to return now to our 3 musketeers, our 3 heroic Brexiteers who have been waiting. It's time, gentlemen and lady, to deliver your message to Boris Johnson. This could be the last outpost, the final salvo, your final word. Boris might sell us out over the weekend. Message to Boris Johnson. First, Ben Habib.
David Cameron shirked his promise on Brexit. Theresa May broke her promise on Brexit. Boris Johnson won his thumping majority on a promise to get Brexit done. The only contract that matters is the contract Boris Johnson has with the people of the United Kingdom, not the withdrawal agreement, not what it says in the political declaration. He must honour that contract, the promise he made on page 5 of his manifesto, and if necessary, leave without a deal.
Thank you, Ben. Quite right. I agree with everything you say there. Jon, you know, this could be the last hurrah before a deal is signed. You've got a few moments with Boris. What would you say to him?
Boris, why was Brexit so significant? Surely it was significant because it shattered the consensus which had existed for years, if not decades, a consensus that said we want more and more power vested in technocrats, bureaucrats and lawyers. And the people got the chance to speak. They said, no, no, no. We want power to vest with us. We want a proper functioning democracy. Boris, just think about that and ask yourself, what side are you on? Are you on that elite side, or are you going to listen to the people and give power to their voice?
Jon, superb. Ben Habib was nodding so much there. Once again, he's going to need some doctor's treatment or at least a massage when he gets home. Dawn Westcott, again, message to Boris Johnson straight from the heart.
Boris, we want to be excited about Brexit. We can see so much potential. We just want to feel joyful about it. Please walk away from this awful withdrawal agreement. Please negotiate a free trade agreement with a clean slate. Get it done properly, and this country will be behind you. We need something to really cheer us up. We are raring to go and rebuild, rejuvenate, and take this country forwards. So give us a proper Brexit, please. Thank you.
Superb comments. Thank you. It's been so great to get you on after all this time. I just want to round off tonight's show with a few of these comments from Facebook. We are getting inundated, and it's so long that we've had abuse on social media throughout 4.5 long years of valiantly shouting into a headwind like a crazed captain in the crow's nest of a ship in the middle of a storm. To actually get some praise feels weird.
Yeah, it does. It feels like I don't know what to do with it.
But anyway, look, Joe, great show. Keep it going. Bless you and your team.
Yes, we've got Kevin saying, I found Unlocked last week. I love it. Thank you. Please keep it up. It's your show, people. It's for you.
It is. Julie, these lockdowns are killing our town here in South Yorkshire. Please show us some mercy. Sally, sending Thomas in Italy, love and light from Manchester. The great thing about Unlocked, hasn't it been from the beginning? We've extended olive branches of friendship to our European counterparts, the Eurosceptics. Brexit was never about destruction. It was about opportunity and bringing us all together and believing in a brighter future free of the European Union. And we might be just about to do it. We might be days away. This really is the final countdown for Europe. If you've enjoyed watching us tonight, please share. Please follow us on Facebook at Unlocked United Kingdom, on Twitter and YouTube at Unlocked_UK_. It's been another emotional and amazing show. And when Brexit's gone, what will we talk about?
I know.
We'll have to talk about normal things again. But until then, we're going to see you next time, because one thing's for damn sure as mustard. Until Boris gets Brexit done, we are going to be here as the guard dogs of Brexit, fighting all the way to the wire. Thanks for watching Unlocked. You've been amazing. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.